Let's take a look at some information and charts on Monero for Brave New Coin. Monero is a proof of work coin with a perpetual block subsidy and an inflation rate that remains stagnant after, I believe it's 18 million tokens are mined. This is to help ensure security and integrity over the long term. I think that's generally okay for anything that isn't BTC, and ideally BTC won't need a blockchain subsidy in 2061 or whenever the block reward runs out. And if we look at hash rate and difficulty for Monero, it's continued to rise since the crypto night to random X consensus algorithm shift, which favors GPU mining. Unlike ETH, unlike Doge, unlike LTC, unlike BTC, Monero hasn't seen a massive drop in hash rate, even with a drop in price, but mainly because of China. It appears as though most of the Chinese related mining was GPU and ASIC based and not necessarily CPU based. Monero has a history of being used for ransomware, botnets, crypto lockers, crypto jackers, all that sort of stuff. I think the botnets do better with CPU based mining. So if I was creating a botnet, I would be using Monero. And maybe that some of that is baked in here. I'm not trying to FUD Monero. That just is what it is. It's really good at anonymity and obscuring transaction data. So yeah, it's perfect for criminals, but it's also perfect for anybody who wants digital anonymity. Monero also has a general fund, treasury of sorts. There was some Reddit drama about this. You can pull up in the Monero thread as far as what they're spending on and why. Again, I like the idea of treasuries for any coin. That way you're not getting outside sources to pay for dev work. LTC has this issue where they have the cup out to pay for Mimblewimble development. And BTC is very similar. If the devs don't get paid, they have a hard time living and focusing their energy on development. The flip side of that is where you get a bunch of devs who were in coins early, made a ton of money, and just don't want to work anymore. I don't know what percentage that is versus the percentage that don't get paid, but it's obviously important that you're paying the developers of the coin to remain updated and bug-free. Monero also has atomic swaps available. You can read about atomic swaps. The question for Monero is anytime you change the transaction type off of the main chain, you risk breaking that anonymity. Now they go into explaining why that may not be the case here, but for me it would always be a concern if I were trying to stay anonymous and remain anonymous. Your best bet is just to always hide in the crowd on the Monero blockchain. If we look at the inflation rates for the proof of work coin, Zcash up here at 11.5%, Monero down here at 1.3%. I mean, that's enough slam dunk right there as far as which one's a better buy over the long term. We can talk about reasons why Zcash's inflation is that high, blah, 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 blah. Doesn't matter. Again, it doesn't matter why Link is selling. I don't care. The point is they're selling. The point is supply is increasing. Circulating supply is increasing. Same thing with Zcash, especially relative to other stuff. This doesn't happen in a vacuum. When we're talking about inflation for coins, even ETH at 4% is a substantial amount of notional value that needs to be bought every day to keep price where it's at, assuming the miners are selling. For Monero, there's just kind of not that much floating around. The problem with Monero is it's not really listed anywhere because it has issues with regulatory bodies around the world because it's so good at what it does. So it's been delisted from a lot of Asian exchanges or just never listed on a lot of Western exchanges. And that's definitely been an issue for Monero staying in the conversation. If you want to disappear an altcoin, just delist it everywhere and make it hard to buy. I mean, that's the best way to do it, regardless of the fundamentals. The Monero people think they have the best fundamentals of all the coins, but at the end of the day, as a coin that I use for speculation more than anything personally, it's very hard to get, very hard to sell, buy, etc. Kraken's one place where you can get it in the US, but that's definitely a big issue. Doge, right? Doge has virtually no actual use case other than speculation. Sits at 4% inflation. And if you look at the Doge chart versus the Monero chart, it doesn't make any sense at all based on fundamentals. If we look at transaction counts, those have continued to increase since 2019. In the line graph here, transaction counts have fallen off pretty considerably over the past couple months, along with the rest of the market. And fees remain extremely low relative to everything else at an average of 5 cents per transaction. When they changed the bulletproof stuff, it went from 50 cents on average to 5 cents or less. So that was a big scaling change that they made for the better. And even with the rise in transactions, fees did not explode. So that says that the scaling is working. And as far as on-chain data, I can't look at most of it because there isn't any for Monero. That's how good the obscurity is. You can't see active addresses. You can't see transaction amounts, so I can't look at NVT. I can't look at any of that other stuff, which goes to show you that, yeah, it's actually a privacy coin through and through. If you look at Monero in Google Trends over the past 5 years, subtle up creep here. A lot of this, again, is based on where it's listed and where you can get it around the world. Those windows are closing, and if anything, it's being funneled into darknet markets for better or for worse, as things like ransomware creep up. Last video I talked about WannaCry and Colonial Pipeline ransomware, and governments around the world generally saying they've had enough is enough, and that's going to continue to close the walls on stuff like Monero. And now they've pissed off the Saudis by going after Saudi Aramco with a $50 million ransomware to be paid in Monero. It's listed somewhere down here, I'm sure. It's not in the article, but it's they're not taking Bitcoin. They want Monero, and there's a reason for that. It's extremely hard to trace and does its job extremely well. If we move on to technicals, I'm going to start with the 2-year MA multiplier, the 2-year MA in the green here, and 5 times the 2-year MA in the red. Historically, for most coins, you can use this as an oscillator where the buy zone is below the 2-year MA and the sell zone is above 5 times the 2-year MA. Yes, you need to curve fit this. Yes, this will change over time. For each coin, it's highly dependent. Whatever works the best on backtesting is what you use for forward testing and or the future. There was a comment in one of the last videos about selling when it's in the red, it always goes higher, it's inevitable, blah, blah, blah. Now, the point here isn't telling you buy everything you can here and sell everything you can the first time it goes above or below these lines. Like the RSI, if it goes below 20, that doesn't say it's done. If it goes above 80, that doesn't say it's done. It says it's overbought here. Historically, Monero, throughout all of 2017, was above that 5-year MA multiplier, or 5 times that MA multiplier. So you can always expand it or relax it, but if you expand it to, say, 7 times or 8 times, you're not really capturing what just happened here when Monero went to around 530. So there's a give and take here as far as signal to noise is concerned. And if it looks like this on backtesting, I'm probably not selling anything until it gets above this multiplier. But you get burned in cases like this when it didn't even quite get there. And that's for a lot of coins. A lot of coins didn't quite exceed the 5x multiplier this go around. ETC did. There were a few altcoins that did. Monero did not. At least on a daily close, it did not. But it tells you when things are looking more and more overbought, especially when you add in this midline. You can see how healthy this bull trend was above that midline the entire time versus here where it went up straight back down. And now, if anything, there's this head and shoulders aspect to this where if this breaks any lower, it's almost certainly going to touch 100, 115, the 2-year MA multiplier. So this isn't end all be all for every single coin. Again, you're going to need to curve fit this a little bit. That's the point. But across the board, for most coins, the 1-year or 2-year MA multiplier at 5 times does really well at telling you when to get in and out. For stocks, it's around 2.5 to 2. It's a little different. Those get a little less overheated compared to crypto. But it's mean reversion principles, it's oscillator principles. It's all that stuff rolled into one. And it's literally a click on the chart and I don't have to think about it. It's like, oh, okay, this isn't in the buy zone yet. Next chart, next coin. Or we're in the sell zone. Okay, gonna start DCAing out, dollar cost averaging out of my position. So if I'm a Monero maxi, I wouldn't start buying until sub 120 personally for a long-term hold. On the pitchfork with the 5200 cross, the monthly pivots, VPVR, and RSI, there's also a bunch of support between 90 and 150. That's also the bottom half of the bullish pitchfork. There's a death cross here, And below 150, there isn't really, I guess it's hidden here around 100 to 90. That's the next monthly pivot down. Those are going to shift every month, but again, ultimately, I'm not buying this until it's down here. And over time, this is going to continue to increase. So by the time it actually gets there, the 100 to 125 range may be the bottom of the pitchfork. I don't know, right? We're talking like March 2021. But this doesn't quite look bad enough to buy yet. And if anything, it looks like early stage bear market type of activity. Even being down over 50% from the high. And if you look at the cloud, it's very simple. Above the cloud, bullish. Below the cloud, bearish. Anything flat on the cloud is a mean reversion target. Currently, that's 340 on Monero. Virtually every coin has a very strong magnet for mean reversion right now because of the swiftness of the sell-off in May. So ideally, all of this stuff will move together if it moves up. For BTC, that's 44 to 46K. For ETH, that's 3K. And for Monero, it's 340. So if you are a trader in the lower timeframes, this is what I would focus on. How convinced are you that this is oversold? How convinced are you that a mean reversion is possible? You can look at the cloud for targets, but ultimately the 12-hour probably will tell you if this starts to get above the 12-hour again. You can gain confidence that it goes to 340, but right now, this does not look bullish in any regard. Below the cloud, bearish TK cross. There's nothing there just yet, but I'd keep an eye on that 12-hour. You can also watch the daily alligator fractal stuff. Again, we're bullish if MAs are crossed green, red, blue, and we're bearish if they're blue, red, green. Still blue, red, green. We're also bullish if we're breaking above these fractals on something like Poloniex where the spreads are high. You're going to get a lot of noise here. But what you want is, for a bull entry, you want to see these MAs cross, much like they did here, and you want to see price break above bull fractals. So currently it would probably mean something above 205 to 220 for a move upward. Now this could, much like many of the DeFi charts, form an inverted head and shoulders type of chart pattern. Shoulder, head, shoulder. This isn't going to fit your traditional inverted head and shoulders thing, but if this moves to 270 to 290, goes flat for a month, and then moves up to 340, 400, right? Then everyone's going to say, oh, it was obvious. That was an inverted head and shoulders, right? But as this stands now, I don't think it's a falling wedge. I don't think it's a descending triangle. I don't think it's anything, just a bunch of noise. I would definitely watch this on the daily and on the 12-hour. Monero BTC, for me, just untradeable noise. Again, historically, it's not held anything since 2017 as far as holding those highs. It's just been down only, really. So as a trade against BTC, again, you might be a Monero maximalist thinking, why do people bother with BTC? Because it's completely transparent, doesn't have anonymity, the list goes on. But ultimately, the chart doesn't lie. BTC has been a better store of value over the past 5-6 years. So that's the way that cookie crumbles. As far as support resist levels, I'd look at this volume. Tons of volume at any lower low here. Tons of resistance at any higher high. So there's probably just turtle soups around, random walk. Again, I don't really think it's super tradable. You're getting an inverted Adam and Eve here. You're getting a death cross eventually. I don't know. Like, I don't have anything to say about it. Just, it's a mess. So fundamentals are great for Monero. The problem is a lot of people just can't get it, right? Like if it ever goes on Robinhood, that would be great for Monero, but I don't see that ever happening for regulatory reasons. Lastly, I just mentioned the ETH-BTC fund and DeFi portfolio. I trade for Techemy Capital on Enzyme.finance, where you can send ETH or USDC into a smart contract, effectively allowing me to copy trade those funds or just watch what I'm doing. You can see AUM, allocations, performance, and all the trades and fun stuff I'm doing in the yield land. That's all for this one. Like, dislike, comment, share, subscribe. Happy trading.